Hi everyone, and welcome to the feedback session for the University of South Australia Bachelor of Film and Television Look Development course. So most of you in the audience are going to be the students and the participants of this course, but for those of you who have just joined and who don't know me, my name is Xenia Ryan. I'm a senior texture artist at Industrial Light and Magic. So I'm just going to be going through the awesome results of the students from this course. They were tasked with texturing and doing the shading of a Kombi van, and a lot of these guys hadn't really done much texturing prior to the course as well. So they had 6 weeks to sort of start from scratch, build up their knowledge, and learn how to texture the Kombi van using Substance Painter and Arnold for Houdini. Those of you watching, if you have any questions, just feel free to shout out in the chat. More than happy to keep this backwards and forth if you have any ideas or anything you want to suggest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So let me just bring up the Kombi vans. So first of all, we have this beautiful Kombi van. I was very impressed by this one. I thought it was incredibly creative. I loved the color palette. The red and the blue really complemented each other. So the color palette was really nice, and then coupled with the green paint here, that was also really quite lovely. So well done. Really impressed, and I can see you put a lot of effort into the character of this piece. So we have a lot of stickers, a lot of hand painting going on, and I know you worked really hard, so thank you. In terms of feedback and what could we do to push this a little bit further, a couple things. I think the first thing I would probably say for this one is to just take another look at the shininess of the paint. So let's just cycle it around and have a look. So as we can see, as we sort of move the highlight around it, we can see we have quite a broad specular highlight. Now, it's not entirely matte, so the roughness isn't so high that it's sort of diffused out altogether. It still has a little bit of a like a medium specular highlight, but I think it could probably go much tighter. When you sort of go in this middle realm between shiny and non-shiny, especially for paint, it can make it feel a little bit more like a toy Kombi van rather than a real life Kombi van. So it sort of gives it that toy paint sort of look. If we get up some reference images, I've just found a few random things online. Let's just take a look at this one. So if we have a look at this Kombi van, now I know this one might be a bit cleaner than what you were going for, but you can see that we have this really shiny specular highlight. See that reflection, right? So, and around here, if we drop that roughness value and bring back some of that tight specular highlight, I think that will go a long way to really making this look really photoreal. So if we go back to what we have here, we can see we have that matte specular highlight. So drop that roughness. You can keep the dirty areas quite rough, so you do get a bit of a contrast between the two. That will still be quite nice. But if we just reduce some of those areas around here, and I would even drop the roughness of the metal as well. So if we have a look at the metal tires, because it's quite rough, we're finding that we're just not seeing much of a reflection in those tires. If again we have a look at the reference image, we can see that the metallic reflection in those tires is still quite shiny. It also provides a nice contrast to the paint as well. So you can still have a little bit of dust and dirt on it, but try and maintain the shininess of that metal. Otherwise, it sort of it stops behaving and looking like a metallic surface. So get that shiny, bring that drop that shininess down a little bit. Tires look great. The tires have an appropriate level of roughness, and I like how you've got a bit of contrast happening between the green and the blue roughness as well. If we take a look at your metal matte, this is accurate. We have black in areas of non-metal, and we have white in areas of metal. So well done. And with our roughness map, we can see that we do have that middle grey specular highlight reflection. So I would, in seeing this, I can see that this is quite rough. So yeah, drop that right down. You could probably get it in the realms of about 0.1 to 0.2 for a paint. And you can keep this nice white detail in there. I think that's quite nice. And yeah, that's great. And for those in the audience, if you're looking to sign up for feedback, I can see someone's just asked. This particular feedback session is for the University of South Australia, so it is a particular class which I've offered my advice for them. I suggest if more and more people are wanting some feedback, I can have a chat to the guys and just put your idea in the Discord channel. If you sign up for the Rookies Discord and drop a note in there, if one of the guys see it, maybe we can organise something in the future. But I frequent that that Discord chat, so take a look in there. Yeah, so well done on this one. So I'm going to move on to the next one now. So my immediate thoughts for this one. So first of all, lovely colour choice. I think the green complements the white quite well. All of the materials look and feel correct, and I can see that the the paint feels like metal, rubber feels like rubber. So on the base level, those material properties are done very well. We can see that we have got the metal map, we have metal, and then we have non-metal, so well done. And no worries. And for the roughness map, we have quite a bit going on there as well. So in terms of feedback for this Kombi van, the first thing I would say is we need to just increase the samples of the render. We can see that the render is quite noisy and it's got struggling to resolve that. So you just want to increase the samples in the render and get that nice and sharp, just so we can really see those details. We could possibly zoom in a little bit as well, because it's a little bit hard to see from quite a distance. And the next thing I would look at, so two major hard-hitting things for this Kombi van. First of all, I'll take a look at the tires. I think what would look really interesting is if we could introduce some of this chrome. If we put the chrome onto the middle of the tires, I think that would add a lot of interest. Right now, I think it does kind of look like it's unfinished or a little bit unpainted. So if we get a material separation happening here, we get some nice metal happening on there, that would be really nice. And the next thing I would do is just have a look at the black sort of soft halo around all of the edges. We can see that there around every single edge, there's sort of this even darkening. Now, whilst dirt most certainly could accumulate in some of those areas, I would just try and break it up a little bit. So if we go to, I think we could see it a bit better in this map, we could see that it was really quite uniform around every edge. I usually get around this by multiplying over, let's say, a large fractal or a large cloud texture, just to remove it in some areas. And then that will just make it feel a little bit non-natural. But well done. We'll keep working on this one. Next up, we have Williams. I believe it's Williams, yeah. So again, beautiful color choice. I like the green and the white, complement each other really well. And I think the blue metallic material is another interesting feature. It does looks quite cool. A similar sort of note on this one is that black uniform darkening around the edges. I think that's one of the first things I noticed on this one. Was I love some of this dirt buildup up here. I think that's really nice. We could probably just reduce some of that soft halo-like effect around all of the edges. And if we were to reduce this soft effect and just leave this sort of sharp contrasty stuff up here, and we could probably add a little bit more of that contrasty stuff in areas, but if we remove that soft sort of glow, I think that's going to go a long way. If we start to add dirt around every single edge, it does give it a sort of line art feel, so it becomes a little bit more cartoony. So again, to combat that, we would just remove it in some areas by multiplying over some different interesting patterns. Similar sort of note with the roughness on this one, we could probably drop it a little bit. It's a little bit, it's still not like it's not entirely matte. And if we go to the roughness channel, let's just have a look at the value. Yeah, we could probably just reduce it just a little bit more. It's getting there in terms of like a nice shiny look, but if we drop it a little bit more, because paint can be quite low, we want to see some nice reflections in that paint. And you could probably go a bit higher in your tires. Your tires being sort of a middle ground, you might be able to increase the roughness of that a little bit as well. But it doesn't, yeah, so see it's appearing, tires are appearing quite shiny. Although it doesn't look too bad. I will just increase it just a tiny little bit. It's not too bad at all. And lastly, I would just have a look at reducing the bump and the height mapping in some of these areas. So I don't mind that. I think that sort of looks, it sort of looks like it's chipping a little bit or it's bubbling a little bit. we could probably just reduce it ever so slightly because it is causing a bit of noise. So it's like sort of around here and around there. Just reduce that bump just a little bit so it isn't so strong, but it isn't too bad at all. I think I noticed it more around here. Yeah, so we're getting this sort of sparkle effect happening up here. So reduce that height. And I say to my students, every time, if you're going to use height in Substance Painter or any sort of program that matter, keep your values quite soft. So don't, drag the slider all the way to 1. Quite often I just tap it in just a tiny bit, less than 0.1. If you do it too high, it can become quite strong too quickly. So yeah, I think that's sort of my feedback for this one. Great addition of the sticker. I think it gives it a lot of character. So nice work. Cool. And I think lastly, I would say to introduce some soft variations in your roughness map. I love how you've got a few details going on. So we've got some chips happening, and we've got a few little secondary layers coming in. If you were to get like sort of just a soft fractal pattern into this roughness map, it would just give it a little bit more interest when the light cycles over it. So if we have a look at some other roughness maps, even this one here, see how we just got a subtle, I would go even softer. This is probably because this was more of a dirtier Kombi van, but it's because it's got this nice sort of pattern in there. When the light shines over it, you do have quite an interesting pattern come in. So if you were to pop one of them into your roughness map, that would just assist it with this flat value. All right, so but well done, great work, and really you should be really happy with it. And this belongs to, I believe this is Ringy Jack. So I was really impressed by this one. I would say it's really up there with some of the best ones I received. I think the reason this works so well is that the secondary layers are just very thoughtfully placed, and they're very subtle as well. Well, not entirely subtle. There's quite a bit of them, but the way that they sort of transition, we haven't got too much height mapping going on. It's quite soft. We have a nice mixture of this nice contrasty detail mixed with a softer pattern. Everything has a nice overlay or a pattern to it. We've got see all this nice fractal stuff happening. We've got some scratches. We've got some sort of chipping textures as well. So it doesn't look hand painted, and it doesn't look substancy. Substancy is a word that some people might use if they might drop and drag like a smart mask straight out of Substance Painter. This looks like you've gone and hand painted it and really put a lot of thought into every detail that you've gone and placed on this, and it looks like something that you would see in a real life Kombi van. So very well done with that. Really happy with this. I think this is really nice how we have sort of this, again, this contrasted big chunks, and then we also got some softer fine detail as well. To push this to the next level, only a few minor notes which I think will really help this pop is just the only area that dirt is getting a little bit procedural is around the tires. So if we do have a look around the tires, see, look at this beautiful variation. Around the tires, it's hard to see here, but it's sort of very even around every nook and every cranny in this tire. So if we go back to this here, we can see that uniformity around every single crevice. So just multiply some of that out, or just add a little bit more variation, and that will really assist with just removing some of that procedural nature around the tires around here as well. And the second note I would give would just be to reduce the roughness of this metal on the tire. I think if you just reduce the roughness, again, if I just make reference to what we see here, see we've got this reflection back here. I know you were going for quite a dirty Kombi van, but I think if you were just to reduce the roughness a little bit, you can still add some dirt onto the tires, but it would just add a little bit more interest. And because see how here we've got like a really shiny paint, but then you've still broken it up with dirt. So do the same thing here. That will just really make that material look and feel more metallic. But other than that, really well done. Yeah, great work. So move on to the next one. All right. Oops. Let's play this one. So again, a lovely Kombi van. We have a lot of interesting secondary layers happening. This belongs to Patrick. So Materials look and feel great. I love how you've got some metallic surfaces coupled with the dielectric paint. Well done. In terms of the material properties themselves, I could probably go a little bit shinier with the metal, but other than that, it's really quite spot on. See how sort of it's getting shinier in this area here? I think if you were lean more towards this shiny material here and just bring back some of the sharpness in that reflection. It's a really minor note for this one, but it would just help. And I love some of these secondary layers you've got going here. So really quite interesting. You've got some sort of larger details coupled with some smaller ones. You've got some sort of build up happening in the edges and crannies, nooks and crannies. And it's quite interesting. And you've got some other little interesting things happening here, like as the light cycles over it in the roughness map. So that's fantastic as well. I guess to improve this for next time, the next sort of logical step would be, let me just have a look at this. Yep, that looks pretty good to me, and your roughness. So I think the next thing would be to, let's have a look. I would add some rubber material to some of the windows. So if we have a look around here, generally on the Kombi van around the windows, it is made up of a black rubber material. So if we have a look over here, again around the van, you generally have that black rubber. I know some of the frame, so some of this frame here could be white because that's like a painted surface, the same as this area here, how it's painted red. But on the innermost piece of geometry, there is meant to be a piece of rubber. We can see it's around here. So if we just get some rubber happening around the windows, that will just help that sit nicely in the real world. And I believe, yeah, so rubber around there, and then maybe you can keep the white around there. And maybe in terms of the dirt, what you could probably do next is to have a look at dirty Kombi vans in real life and make sure you're copying a reference image exactly. So I guess whilst this looks really cool, I'm not sure how this dirt would appear on the Kombi van in this specific pattern. What would probably be a little bit more natural is if we had some of the dirt spraying back behind the tires as it's sort of driving along and the dirt is spraying backwards. It would probably appear a little bit more behind the tires as opposed to in these sort of irregular shapes and patterns around the van. So without a reference, it's hard to say, but definitely get up a reference image and make sure you're observing real life secondary layers and how they occur. And other than that, I think you've done a fantastic job. We could probably also put a little bit more dirt on the tires as well because the tires are looking a bit clean. All right. Well done. Great work. So your metal map as well is looking really good. So it makes sense. It's black in the areas of non-metal, and we have white in the areas of like where it's been chipped, revealing some metal underneath. Great work. All right. Next up, we have Ellie. So Ellie's produced a really fun van. I absolutely loved this one. So much character. I loved reading all the little messages. Great work. I love it when the students put their own like character into their Kombi van. It's part of the reason I created the van, because people could just put so much character and interesting sort of blank canvas, right? So great work. You did a fantastic job. In terms of feedback for this one, I would just have a look at the roughness value of this one. So we're getting a similar sort of note with this, how we have that in between specular value, how it's sort of half shiny, half rough. So I would just drop that roughness just a little bit, bring back some of that shininess, right? And if we have a look at your material map, so great work. It should be black. In terms of the roughness, yeah, we could probably drop this quite a bit because it's that in-between value. We are taking on that toy car appearance again. So drop that down, bring back some of that shininess. Again, I'll just make reference to this Kombi van, how we have that shiny metallic reflection. It's really quite crisp. And then bring back some of that shininess. Everything else does look quite great. So I think that will just really just push it to the next level and help things along. I would give you the same note for the metal as well. If we drop the roughness in the metal, that will bring back some of the reflections and add a nice, interesting contrast between that and the non-metal Kombi van. But other than that, great work. I love the color choice. It's really fluorescent, really bright, and it really caught my eye. Great work. Next up we have, oops, 1 minute. No worries, Ellie, you did a great work. You should be really proud. So next up we have, I think this was Jordan's. So again, fantastic work, and a lot of interesting different materials and patterns happening here. We have some scrape marks, and we have sort of some gold coupled with the red. So I think you've it's got a really nice sort of steampunk sort of look. So great job in the color composition on this one. In terms of feedback for this, I would just make sure again that you are copying a reference image. So right now I'm finding it a little bit hard to understand some of the different materials that are going on. I think most notably, I mean, because this is like a really dirty old paint, but what I'm struggling to understand and read is this material, the main material on the body. So at first I thought maybe it was just entirely covered in rust, but I can see that we have rust on the edges and on the corners. So that tells me that it might not be rust. It might be something a bit different. But it could also just be the texture of the paint itself. So I guess I would just take another crack at looking at your reference images, making sure that you have a sensible and realistic base layer on the van, and then build up those secondary layers on top of that. If this is a dirt and a rust covering the van, perhaps what could help sell it is if we were to add some large scale breakup to it. If it wasn't uniform, let's say, you know, it was maybe a bit cleaner on the roof or cleaner on some of the outer surfaces, that will just really help sell to me that, okay, we've got this really dirty van, but in some areas, you know, we can still see some of that original material underneath all of these dirty layers. And I think that will really help. I can see you've added some scratch marks and stuff on the sides. So another, and that's where they would naturally occur, as you know, if an accident was to happen. So great work on that. I like the materials of the tires. I think the tires are probably the most successful part of the van. The dirt, it looks just like a dirty rubber. And you've got a nice soft material on there, which looks great. And the gold material on here, this is quite successful in that we have that bronzy material, but it's quite, you know, you've got the separation between that and the red rust on there. So this and this, great work. You've done, looks fantastic. If we go to the metalness map, yeah, so that makes sense. We have non-metal and metal. And we have a look at the roughness. Yeah, so perhaps again we can see it's quite even over the entire van, so just add some large scale breakup to this van. All right, other than that, great work. So next we're moving on to Nathan's. So Nathan's is really fun. Another Kombi van with so much character. You know, the more you look at it, the more there's things to look at. You find more different things to see. So great work. I think a similar sort of note on this one, and this seems to be a general note across the board, is to just observe the roughness value. So again, I would probably drop the roughness of this metal material. That would add, again, a nice reflective component that will contrast nicely against the matte red. In terms of the roughness of the red, I actually like the value that you have here. I wouldn't say drop it to make it shiny. The reason I'm saying that is because the roughness value, as we can see, it's sort of like on the matte end of the spectrum. So it's not in the middle like I've seen in a few previous vans. It's really pushed right to the matte end of things. So I can tell that you were going for a really matte paint, and I think it looks fantastic in terms of the contrast between that and the more shinier paint on top. So I would keep that quite matte. It does look really nice. Drop the roughness of the metal though, and that will give some interesting contrast between the two. Stickers look great. I wouldn't change any of that. I think that's all fantastic. I think if you were to just make that small change on the metal. And next, I would just have a look at this big scrape on the front. So right now, that's the only thing which is taking it away out of that photorealistic realm. And I wasn't quite sure at first why it was doing that. And then I sort of had to think about it, and I said, oh, I think maybe the distribution of the pattern might be a bit off. So what I just did a bit of research, found a few, just basically some pictures of scraped cars. So this is, again, what I encourage you guys to do. If you're ever going to be doing some sort of secondary layer, get a reference of it. So foot scrapes of the cars, all I've done is, you know, just typed in a quick search into Google, and we can see, so something like this. So you've got the material happening, right? So we have the metal material, so great work with that. It's just the pattern that's a little bit off. So we can see here it's a little bit stronger on the outside curvature on the edge. So perhaps on this lip, which is sticking out of the van, that would be the first thing to, you know, scrape against another car. So that would be quite strong. And the tail end of that scrape would be a little bit softer and a bit lighter. So what I like about this pattern is we have a few sort of big broad strokes, and then in between it's sort of quite soft and quite fine. So there's a lot of interest happening with that, right? So if we could look at that and have a look at this, we can see that the distribution of these scratches are just a little bit off. So we can see that the scratches sort of going in different angles. Whereas I would say if this was to scratch something, they should just go directly backwards in a straight motion. Drop it back so it isn't so busy. Get a few like hero scratches, and that will really help sell it. So that's something like this is quite tricky to do. You could try and make your own alpha out of, you know, maybe you could find a reference image and create your own black and white alpha to bring into substance, or you could hand paint it. It's really up to you how you want to go about that. Things like this can be quite tricky to get right, but if you follow a reference image, you can't go wrong. But well done. I was really happy with this one. All right. Yeah, so I was also really happy with the metal and roughness maps as well. So next we're moving on to Enya's. Another beautiful Kombi van, a lot of character, something of, you know, see someone driving along the beach. Materials look fantastic, so I think the spot on with the level of the roughness of the paint. So we can see that even though we have quite a rough, hi Enya, even though we have quite a rough dirt on top of it, we can see that underneath that we still have quite a shiny paint, and that's what we want. So if I just nip over to the roughness value, yep, so we still have quite a dark roughness, which is great. And then that's complemented by the rougher dirt on top of that. So great work. And so let's just go back. I would say for this one, just having another look. I'd say the major note to improve this and get this, like taking it from fantastic to even better than that, I would have a look at the distribution of the dirt on it. So I love the softness of it. It's really nice. So I wouldn't change any of the material properties of the dirt. I would just change up some of the distribution, if that makes sense. So if we have a look at it, it's very even over the entire Kombi van. So if we go to, we can see it a little bit better in the roughness. So see how it's the same over the entire van. So I would just start to think about, all right, again, get a reference image up if you can, and just think about where is this dirt accumulating a bit more. I would say it's probably going to be a little bit dirtier, perhaps on the front end and on the bottom of the van around the tires, less dirtier at the top. And if you were to add just a little bit more of that variation, you'd already have a bit more interest from a distance. So that would be the major note for that one, would just be just to distribute it a little bit better. So maybe reduce a little bit on top. You can probably reduce it a little bit on the rubber as well. It's probably a bit strong up there. And then on the flip side, you could probably make it a little bit stronger in some areas. So perhaps perhaps under here and behind the bumper, that's where things would maybe accumulate a bit more. And you could even start to think about adding some little splatter marks or something like that behind it. Perhaps I think that would, you know, add a bit of interest. Next, I would have a look at, you know, your registration plate. I think you've already got so much character in your van. Add a nice, fun registration plate, and I think that will, you know, really help sell it a little bit more. And in terms of the metal, it doesn't look too bad. I'm just having a look at everything now. I'm thinking that perhaps the color of the metal is a bit dark. There's something not quite right about it. I think it might be a little bit dark. For those of you, in terms of like texturing metal, there's a few key rules that you have to follow when doing metal. And this is why I always recommend, if you're going to do a metal, drag the material straight off the shelf and observe those values and try not to change them too much. The base color of a metal should really not go below about 0.7, so 0.7 or higher in the base color slot. You can take it down a bit lower for artistic effect, but if we're going for a realistic metal, you usually want to keep that quite high or closer to 1. So if I'm looking at this base color, I think this might just be a little bit dark. So just lift that up a bit, and then I would have a look at the roughness of it. I reckon we could probably drop the roughness of the metal, drop it to the same value as what you have with the rest of your paint. And again, that will bring back some of those nice reflections in that metal material. Other than that, great work. Another beautiful Kombi van, and I'll certainly be showing this off at all the events as well. So well done. Very proud. So next up we have this one. We've only got a couple more left. So the students done a great job. A lot of interesting patterns and fun and colourful shapes happening. Really nice and bright and pink, which I always love. So well done. You've got a nice, so the materials themselves are quite great and quite accurate. No worries, Enya, thank you so much. So in terms of these materials, roughness is spot on. So nice shiny roughness. We have a nice shiny metal section here as well. So all the materials look great. The next thing I would start to do is just add some secondary layers. Even clean vehicles are still going to have some sort of wear and tear on them. Only has to be very subtle, but just enough to give it a little bit of interest. Something else I would look at is perhaps changing, I'd perhaps change up the color of the bumper bar, or I think that would just help break it up, because right now it sort of feels a little bit unfinished because that is the same material. And the next thing I did notice was that your roughness map wasn't plugged in correctly. So we can see that this roughness map is the roughness map from the demonstration. So just make sure that you're hooked up to your own roughness map and not the demonstration roughness map, because we can see that coming through when we do cycle the light around it. All right. Other than that, great work. Did a fantastic job to get this up to scratch. All right. I think this is our last one. So Alexander's, again, another fantastic student, you know, very proactive in everything he does. And yeah, another great looking van. So in terms of the materials, they look and feel quite accurate, and there's a lot of cool secondary layers on this one. I really dig in the dirt around the base, and I thought this was kind of cool as well. It sort of looks like a big, large scale paint chipping and sun fading and all kinds of fun stuff. So I really like that pattern. Great work. In terms of improvements for this one for next time, there's only a couple small points I would do. The first thing I would do is reduce the height mapping that you have on this van. I think this, so as we cycle the light across, we see this sort of bumpy pattern. Whilst it's true that a lot of paint will have that really fine grain in it, from this distance, you probably wouldn't see it so strong. So I would increase the frequency of it, so it's not, so the big bubbles aren't so big. Reduce the frequency so it's like little tight bubbles, and knock it back by like 50% at least. You don't really want to see it from this distance. It's a little bit more successful up here where we don't see that pattern. So just drop that down. And I would also drop the height information that's happening on the dirt layer, because it is just a little bit strong and a little bit thick. So if we were to drop that down a little bit, that's really going to help. I think down here, things are looking quite great because the height isn't so strong around here, but just in these sort of areas, it is just a bit strong. So just drop that down a little bit. And what else could we do? I reckon we could probably go a little bit shinier on the middle. Bring back some of the shiny reflective material. I still like the dirt on it. I wouldn't remove the dirt entirely, but there is on some of these maps, there is like a histogram scan node. So what I would do is I wouldn't remove it. I would just bias it a little bit more so there's a little bit less dirt on there. And that will just bring back some of this nice shiny metal, because this metal does look really nice. And where it's becoming a little bit too dusty, it's losing some of that interest. So just reduce it a little bit, bring back some of this nice shine. I think the last thing I noticed was there was an error on the tires. So we can see that there was this harsh line on the base here. So not really sure what's happening this year, but just have a look and find where that's happening and soften that off or remove that line. Other than that, fantastic work. Again, same note, get a number plate on there, add a little bit more character. That will really just help sell it. And yeah, great work, Alex. You should be really proud of this one. So yeah, I think that's everything for today. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, everyone. You've all worked incredibly hard over this past 6 weeks, and I really can't wait to see what you guys come up with next year. All the best and good luck. See you later, everyone.